So when I originally started getting into photography, equipment and gear and lenses and camera bodies were all really exciting to use. Anytime something new came out, I'd jump straight on it and try and save up to buy the new latest and greatest technology. Now that I'm further on in my career and it's not as much of a priority for me, they're more a tool rather than a toy, I tend to take a different approach when a new camera comes out. When the A7R4 was released and I read about the specs, originally I talked about it in my first thoughts video. I didn't think it was going to be something I would buy because I didn't feel like the upgrades were enough for me to make me upgrade from my A7R3s. Now after using them over the past few days, that opinion's changed a little bit. I'm still not 100% settled that I'm going to buy some R4s, but it's such an amazing camera and I think for a lot of people it's going to be a really good option. Originally I planned to go out last Sunday, just gone, and shoot a model friend of mine, get some really cool photos, but that couldn't happen because of the weather. So we just went out with my friend Ethan and I've been shooting it around home and just on my daily trips out and about, and it's been a fantastic camera. So let's jump straight into the review. Now the first thing I'm going to talk about, because most people are going to ask me about this, is how it feels in the hand. Now I gotta say, it's a massive improvement over the A7R3 or any other camera that Sony have released. It feels so much better. I've said so many times I have big hands and it just feels so much nicer to hold. I'd still definitely probably get a little plate on the bottom, like I have my Really Right Stuff plate on my A7R3s. They just make them a little bit taller and my pinky's not slipping off the bottom. So if I decided to get some R4s, I'd definitely get one of those once they came out. But the grip itself feels much, much better to hold. And in fact, even though the camera is slightly heavier, only by about 10 grams, it feels lighter than the A7R3 just because it's easier to hold. The next thing in terms of the body itself is the buttons and the dials all feel much better, much more tactile. The shutter button feels really nice. I've noticed it's slightly more angled forwards a little bit. So when you're pressing it, it's a little bit more ergonomic and a little bit more comfortable to fire off shots with it. I also really like the new exposure compensation dial, how it has the lock on it. And I enjoy that you don't actually have to have the lock on. You can just have it unlocked and you don't have to worry about it slipping or bumping the exposure or anything like that. But if you're not someone that uses the exposure compensation dial, you can just put it on 0, lock it off, and you're not going to have any problems. The new focus joystick is really nice. It makes it much easier to move the focus point around, and pair that up with the new red focus dot option. It's a really enjoyable process. I don't get as frustrated like I did with my A7R3 sometimes because the black focus point is there and it's a little bit hard to see if you've got a really busy background. I found myself having to press the joystick in to go back to the middle just so I could see where my focus point was. That's not a problem anymore, I'm really happy to say, and Sony, they better update the A7R3 and the A7 III with that. I said this before, but the 2 UHS 2 card slots is a big improvement. So I've said this before in my first thoughts video, but the A7R3 and all the other cameras in fact have 1 UHS 2 card slot and 1 UHS 1. So if you're shooting RAW to both cards, you're bottlenecked by that second card slot. The buffer in the camera is really good. It's way better than I thought it would be. I haven't actually tried it with my A7R3s, but with this camera, the A7R4, even with my UHS 1 Extreme Pro SanDisk memory cards, I can get about 30 to 40 shots before the buffer fills up and starts slowing down. So that's really impressive considering the 61 megapixel files. Now, one of the biggest improvements with this camera is the viewfinder. It's so nice. It's such a big improvement. I'm not surprised, I said this before, because it's the same viewfinder out of the Panasonic S1. I've used that camera and it blew my mind. So when I found out it was going to be the same with the A7R4, I was super impressed and it hasn't let me down. It's one of the best viewfinders I've ever used in a mirrorless camera, if not the best, side by side with the Panasonic S1. The LCD screen, I originally thought in my first thoughts video that it was slightly better than the A7R3. After having them side by side and looking at kind of the same photo and just having them, right next to each other, maybe it's just slightly improved. Everybody's saying it's the same screen, but maybe they've done some software tweaks just to make the colors a little bit more neutral or something. It's a big improvement over the A7 III, but I think it's about the same as the A7R3, just maybe slightly better. Now the focus system, in short, is just amazing. So I don't have any complaints with my A7R3. The A7 III, the A9, they all have really amazing focus systems. And I've used all of those cameras extensively and they're all about the same, with the A9 having maybe a slight edge on them because it has the real-time tracking. But the A7R4 is next level. It's so good and it's just so impressive. The eye focus is much stickier. It doesn't lose the subject. And if they turn around, it just locks onto the back of the head automatically with the real-time tracking until they turn around again, and then instantly gets the eye back. Video focus as well. I haven't done a real in-depth test with video focus, but I had my daughter running around the house with eye focus on video, which is totally new. and it works so well. Another small thing I want to note before we move on to image quality is the auto white balance seems to be a little bit faster and a little bit more accurate. So that's a really welcome improvement for me. Now, in terms of image quality, unfortunately I can't edit the RAW files at the moment, but the JPEGs I looked at are really, really impressive. All of these photos you're seeing are just JPEGs, and I've just edited them with my preset pack, and I just toned down the contrast a little bit to allow for that JPEG processing camera. But as soon as I can process the RAW files, I'm going to do another video. It shouldn't be too far away. I'm going to go through and test the dynamic range and the high ISO and stuff like that, and give you guys some RAW files to play with yourself. Now, I think one of the main things people are going to ask me is, should I upgrade? If I'm on the A7III, should I buy the R4? If I've got the R3, should I buy the R4? Etc, etc. It's a really good question. And I think, to be honest, it's going to come mostly down to what you shoot as a photographer. For me, as a wedding photographer, I think it's going to be a really, really big improvement. So I'm doing a lot of weddings and I'm doing a lot of 10-hour days. So having something that's a little bit more ergonomic for me to hold, a little bit better focus system, the better viewfinder, all these things added together are just going to make for a much more enjoyable process for me. I'm still on the fence. I'm not sure if I would just get rid of my R3s and buy R4s. I feel like if you had the R3s, it's not something you need to upgrade to, but if you want to, it's going to be a really good change and I don't think you'd regret it. However, if you're on the A7 III, for example, there's a lot of improvements over that one. If you can deal with the file size, then I think it's a really great camera if you're not too worried about the price. Obviously, it's not a cheap camera, but just think about everything I've said and see if it's going to make a change for you. If you're on the A7 III or an older camera, I think you'll really love it, and it's just going to be a massive improvement. It's a real shame they don't have small RAW yet. I've banged on about that so much, but the file sizes compressed are about 60 megabytes each, so it's not a real deal breaker. I think I can get my head around that, and it's not too much of a problem. Uncompressed, they're like 110, 120 megabytes each, and it's just too much. My computer's not fast enough. I'm using the 1 terabyte SSD drives, and if I've got 5 weddings backed up, I'm gonna need to use a second or a third hard drive even, and it's just not really what I wanna do. So I can deal with it in compressed RAW. I'm sure you guys have your own opinion on that. So thanks for watching, guys. Really appreciate it. Follow along for that image quality test that I'll do soon. Tomorrow I'm going to do a review on the 35mm 1.8, the new Sony full frame lens. And I can tell you right now, straight off, I'm definitely buying that. I've made my mind up. The 35mm 1.8 is mine. See you guys tomorrow with the next video.